The
illustrious Jabba bids you welcome. I'm going to regret this.
I'm Pete Mitchell. He's Peyton Jones. And this is the Church Planter Podcast, brought to you by Church Planter Magazine. Hey, Church Planter, this is Pete Mitchell.
And this is Peyton Jones.
And we are high.
What? You did not start the podcast like that. For just a little clarification, we're not even in the same room. I don't know what what Peter's talking about. Man.
Paul, who? What?
This is Paul's retort to, didn't Peter say that Paul sometimes said things that were difficult to understand? Or was it? No, wait. That was Peter saying that about Paul.
Who's calling who?
Huh?
Did you hear that phone ring?
No. Yeah. Are you high?
Hello?
Are you really answering the
phone?
Hey,
dude. I'm sorry, man. I don't know why my phone just called you.
Hold on a minute. This is a do-over. Is this what we've come to?
Dude.
Making phone calls in the middle of the podcast?
I mentioned... Hey, dude, I'm sorry, man. I think Siri accidentally called you.
No way.
I apologize, man. I'm sitting here doing a podcast on marijuana, and Siri calls you. I don't know what that means, man. I really
what
don't.
I want to know is who did Siri call?
It certainly doesn't mean that I have any particular involvement or non-involvement in the cannabis.
Is that White Tyrone?
Dude, I apologize for that, man. No, you know what it was? We were talking about Paul, and it called Paul.
Oh, no way.
We were talking about Paul's rebuke to Peter, and anyway, so Siri thought I wanted to call you. I apologize for that, man. I do.
Okay.
All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Welcome to the Church Planter Podcast, where we talk about church planting. And today's topic is on the legalization of marijuana and your church plant. That is going to be a big issue in future. But before we get to that, Pete, do you remember the time that we actually got somebody writing or calling in and they said, I was listening to your podcast and Siri called somebody when you guys mentioned something? Remember that?
I think so, yeah.
And we actually, therefore, of course, being us, we thought that was hilarious. In our next podcast, we told Siri to do something for all of our listeners. Do you remember that?
I do.
I think it was like, Siri, what was it? It was something funny like, make a donation to, I don't remember what it was.
You know what it was? I had my phone plugged in. And when you have your phone like plugged in, then Siri will like respond.
Are you serious? So you mean like into the power source?
Yeah. Then you don't have to press any buttons. You just call out her name. And so
I'm going to try this right now. It's plugged in. Siri. Okay, my phone's not doing it.
Well, you have an Android. That's the problem.
No, I got an iPhone. Wait, I gotta have an iPhone to use Siri? Oh, my Siri was broken.
What? Oh my gosh. Okay, well, since
we better get into Smack Talk, dude, because we're really needing to get into this topic. This is a big one today.
Since we've already started to ruin our Smack Talk, we've got a couple of reviews here.
That was Smack Talk.
Yeah, I know. We got a couple of reviews here I got to read. Did you read these ones when I sent them over to you?
They were great.
Okay, so this one's headline, and I believe this one was from Hardcore, though I'm not 100% here. It says, Words of Wisdom Born Out of Experience. That was the title. And then I don't even know. It's got to be like Ephesians dude, but it's EUPH dude, all is one word. So your guess is as good as mine. So here's the review. It was great to hear.
Euphoric.
Yeah, I know, right?
He's euphoric. That's
right?
what it is.
It's great to hear how different church planners have tackled the task to get encouragement from their success and get encouragement from their success. This and their other podcasts that some people don't appreciate. That's why I think this one was hardcore. Would easily be two of the first resources that I would suggest to anyone in church planning. I still wonder, though, if Pete were to get into a physical fist fight with Daniel M., who would win?
Oh my gosh. With Daniel M.
It's not even a question, though. And I'll tell you.
It's not a question.
I'll tell you why it's not a question. That's why I was like, maybe this is Daniel who's writing this in. I don't know.
I did think that for a second.
But it's the reason why it's not even a question is Daniel, God bless him, he's book smart. And let's face it, book smart's left me a long time ago.
I had to compensate with other things.
I had to learn to fight from a young age. And let me tell you, I can tell you pretty securely here, Daniel, no chance in a physical fist fight. Now, you want to put us on Jeopardy together. I'm going to be the guy sitting there going, yeah, he got that one right all episode long. But,
what is poker? You got that one right, Mitchell.
What is hops for 1,000? There's only certain questions here that I could possibly do any justice on. And so here's the other podcast review. Same guy. And I think he was going for the 2 free gifts. So it starts out with the headline, I love it, and the train too. So, he's
man,
listening.
Mr. Rogers had the trolley. I got the train. And Mr. Rogers, I should say, is in my next book, Reaching the Unreached. Cha-ching. See how I did that?
I've listened to this podcast for quite a while now. I must be the one other listener that they keep referring to. I didn't appreciate the smack talk when I first started listening, but now I feel like I get to catch up with some old friends by getting to listen in on bits of Pete and Peyton's life. I've learned so much and begun to think about so many things differently because of their conversations. But I still have one question. What's in the box?
Oh, yeah, baby. We can't tell you what's in the box.
That's
you gotta go look.
That's how you know you got a real fan. When he's really quoting us right back in the review. I love it.
Totally, man. Totally. And I should
what's
say...
in the box?
I love it. So
there was something that brought it full circle back to Daniel M, because on their podcast they have kind of like a smack talk light, which I think they might have taken a little cue from the old Church Planner podcast. Well, I'm just saying,
if they got smack talk light, let's face it, they got all the serious church planners, and we got the ones who've been seriously in the trenches for a while and need the smack talk. Those are our listeners. They need the smack talk.
Yeah, our guys are. We got like the man. I don't know how to put it. Like we've probably got like the Splinter Cell guys. You know what I mean? Like the Commandos. Those are the guys that, like you said, they're in the trench, man. They're a long way from home, doing stuff.
I used to have more friends before I got into church planting.
That's pretty much it.
I love it. And of course, here's one of my favorite quotes.
Pete Mitchell loves you and has a plan for your bank account.
Oh my gosh. So anyway, just as a reminder, if you leave us a review, like our euphoric dude, we're just going to give him that name, euphoric dude. All you got to do is open up Church Planner Magazine on your iPhone or Android. Go down to the bottom right-hand corner. There's a little gear there. Tap that, and it's going to open up a little thing. And in the middle, it'll say, contact us here. You tap that and send us an email. That'll give us what's called your device token, and we will give you all kinds of free swag. And so we're going to give you, Euphoric Dude, the Jump School for free, the videos and the study guide inside the app, and we're going to give you one of the other paid, I don't even know what we call them, paid reports that we've got in the app. So we'll give you one of each of those because you gave us 2 reviews, and we appreciate that. So keep in mind, as many reviews as you guys want to give, we'll give you free stuff for it, as long as they're good reviews like this. These were good reviews. So it works.
Pete's into giving stuff away, which leads me to just mention it is the holiday season, and being that it's the holiday season, end of year giving's kind of a big deal. So you ought to have something online for people to give to at the 11th hour. And Pete happens to be the secret tither. He does make a lot of money. And I'm going to say it. You can't say that, right? Like, you'd be an instant jerk at a cocktail party. Hey, I'm Pete. I make a lot of money.
Really? That's
you can't
funny.
Do that.
I actually brought that up at Thanksgiving dinner. So is that bad form?
Did you look around and say, I make more money than all of you in here combined?
No, but I was thinking it. Just kidding.
But the reality is, Pete is the secret tither. He does go around by night looking for an unsuspecting church planner website, and he will just maybe give, but only if you have mogive.com. Pete, tell us a little bit about Mogive.
Say my name.
Well, mogive.com is an online and text-based giving platform built specifically for the needs of new, growing, and shrinking churches. Head on over to mogive.com/church and tell them Pete and Peyton sent you.
That was the most straightforward ad we've ever done for them.
Yeah, they may not actually like that. They may not renew.
Like, dude, like, what were you doing? Normally you stretch them out 5 minutes. Like, you kind of lose the plot, go off the reservation, then you come back. We get all that time. You ripped us off. What's up?
You know, that's probably what they're thinking too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I don't think they ever listen.
you don't think Kent listens?
I think if he did, they might just pull their ads.
Well,
He
I can't
trusts
argue with you
us.
on that one. Yeah. So
So, Pete, I was going to tell you this week, the wife was like, hey, oh, and by the way, if you guys are new to this, thanks for kind of staying on here. This is Smack Talk. This is a part that the reviewer said, at first I didn't like that. We just chat. We're friends, and we chat for a few minutes, and we'll get into the church planting part. Just bear with us, right? We assume this about you as a church planter. You're normal, right? Like you don't have people kissing your butt all day. You're not like, at the top of a pyramid in a mega church. You're not used to people treating you like God. We figure you're still a normal person, and you still like normal people stuff. So that's why we do this. But here's the deal. The wife was kind of coming around going, hey, Peyton, what are your stocking gifts? Because I gave her my original gift idea, and she laughed. And then I gave her my.
are you
my
talking about
stocking
for
gift.
you?
Yeah. She's like, what do you want me to, just give me some ideas. Because we still do the whole I surprise you thing. Except this year, and as a matter of fact, every year she kind of gives me gift ideas that are so big that it's kind of like, gosh, if I don't get this for her, it's kind of a disappointment at Christmas, so.
If you were to ask Jamie, she would tell you she hates shopping for me because of my motto.
Not me.
My motto is
I know where stuff lives that you can't find. The stuff I find for you for your birthday or Christmas, you don't go to those places. You don't live.
Here's
in
my
those
motto
worlds.
though. My motto is, if I want something, I buy it. I'm an adult. And so at Christmas, there's never anything for her to buy me.
See, what Jamie needs to do is just go ahead and talk to Peyton, because I got things that I'm like, I can't wait till you get this. Like for example, right? When it last Christmas, I got you the Knight Rider USB charger for your car.
Yeah.
So I mean, Peyton knows. I know how to get you stuff, but you're not going to find that stuff. I'm a geek. I'll find that stuff for you.
Let's face it. It was a Facebook ad. That's how you found it.
All I can say is when the big reveal comes in a month's time and we find out what Peyton got Pete this year, because you're going to talk about it on the podcast. Trust me.
I've
already ordered it.
I was going to get you some craft beer, but
but then I thought, I don't want him to get fired.
no, actually, that thought never crossed my mind. I didn't care if you got fired or not. But then I was like,
You're like, if it comes to the house, I'm just going to drink it.
that was my end game. I was like, well, he can't have it. I might as well drink it myself.
No. I meant you. Like you're going to order it and go, oh, it'll never get to him. I'll drink it before I give it to Peyton on Christmas.
So anyway, we were talking earlier before the show started about underwear of all things.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So I told her, I go, this is going to sound weird, but Pete keeps talking about this underwear on the podcast and he makes it sound so snuggly. I want some. And so I start describing it to her. and she's sitting down and she's totally tuning me out. Like I'm going, oh yeah, it's got like, TIE fighters and like explosions. And she just like starts shaking her head and goes, just email me. Just email me the links. That's all. She don't want to hear anymore.
Oh, it's funny because since that episode where we talked about the old Star Wars underwear, I've bought maybe 4 or 5 pair. And what I have discovered is that there's only 2 of them I actually like to wear because they fit right.
Send me that so I can tell my wife.
A couple of them, they're a little bit bikini briefish for me.
That was a bad mental picture, Pete.
I know, right? But the funny part is I still wear them.
I don't want it. That's too much information now.
But the one that Jamie hates the most, that I find to be second most comfortable, is the one that's got Chewbacca all over it. She's like, that's kind of creepy because it's got these Chewbacca heads all over it. I'm like,
well, that's awesome, dude.
Suck it up.
Didn't I sent you the link for that one? See,
I think so, and I bought it. I was like, ooh, that looks like a good pair.
Nice.
Yeah. I bought a lot of them. I have a lot of Star Wars underwear now. Getting ready here for Rogue One coming up here in really days at this point. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Luke went to a birthday party yesterday. Another bunch of 5-year-olds, and everyone got a Jedi outfit.
What?
Yeah, like the what do you call it? The robe thing that they wear.
Yeah, the robes.
So Jedi he came home with one. He's like, "This is what I'm going to wear when we go to Rogue One." I'm like, "All right, this is awesome,
dude." I can't wait for that film. It looks so good.
Yeah. I'm pretty excited myself. But
we'll have a whole episode about it after it comes out.
Of course we will. We will.
We did last year. Whole episode. So guys, when Star Wars comes out,
our pets' heads are falling off.
So when Rogue One comes out, when any Star Wars movie comes out, which has only been one since we started this podcast, let's be honest, we'll pretty much dedicate a whole episode to that.
Why, you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerve herder.
Who you calling scruffy looking?
Hey, Pete, let's do it. You ready? I love you.
I know.
You complete me. All right. Hey, let's go ahead and get into the topic. Doc Brown.
Okay, but I will say this. Just food for thought. Gilmore Girls did just come out on Netflix, so we might need to watch an episode or 2 between now and the next time we record.
I have a confession to make.
Did you already watch them?
Yeah.
All of them?
I watched like 2 of them. Thing is, I can't stay awake. They're like 2 hours long, man. By the time I get the kids down, I'm pretty toast. So the wife and I'll wake up like, oh, what just happened, and we'd be like, oh, we missed it again. So we're watching it very slowly in about 30, 40 minute segments that we stay awake during. We're like,
I heard it's not good for binging on these. They're like mini movies.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't want to say anything. You watch it, but we'll talk. Next episode, we'll talk.
All right. Doc, take it away.
Great Scott, it's time for this week's topic.
Mr. Jones, what is this week's topic?
Well, let me say before we get into that topic, which is going to be marijuana and the legalization and what you should do in your church plan. For those of us that are new, we did one day confess that we had watched the Gilmore Girls, and so we just lost respect from all of our new listeners who didn't have any for us anyways. So
I didn't admit to it. I just said I wanted to know what happened to Luke. That's all. I just wanted to know what happened to Luke.
The real question is what happened to Suki.
I didn't know something happened to Suki.
You'll just have to watch and find out. So guys, the California voted on the whole marijuana thing.
Well, so did I think 4 other states.
Yeah, but we only talk about California.
But I'm
We're
just
like
saying,
a microcosm of America. It's like we only know what happens in our backyard. Like American news only knows what happens in America. In fact, nothing else happened in the world at all during the past year.
All I could think of was your comment last week that, no, Britain's got a way better form of government than we got. And I'm like, No, still not coming around to it. Still like our republic better than theirs. No parliament for us.
Yeah, but Parliament's pretty much like a Congress, and you got the Senate and the House of Reps. But we just kind of copied it.
Yeah, but we have guns.
Well, the only thing that's not cool about their deal, though, is you got instead of the Senate, you got the House of Lords, and really that's pretty much just like rich privilege. And that part sucks.
If you don't
They're
know what
like
we're talking about, listen to
Lord of
last
such
week's
and such, and that's pretty dumb.
Listen to last week's episode if you have no idea what we're talking about.
Hey, but getting back into this, so
Yeah.
they legalized marijuana in multiple states. What do you do when you're a church planner and your state just legalized marijuana? Because prior to that, as a pastor, the wife comes to you and says, "My husband smokes pot all the time. He's a loser, and I don't, I'm worried about the kids." And back then you go talk to him and say, "Hey man, that's against the law. Like you can't do that." And then he says, "Well, I got a medical," and there was, there were loopholes before
In
And
some
you could
states. In some states, yeah.
in some states. But what do you do? See, what's happened now is, whereas before there was a criminal element in some states, that's been removed. And so now it has to be approached. I mean, first off, let's just lay our cards on the table. I'll tell you what I personally feel about marijuana. Not a big fan. I was a psych nurse for, I did some drug and rehab work and have been involved with recovery on and off throughout ministry. And myself, I am not personally an addict, but I have been surrounded by addicts my entire life. I've lost one of my best friends to addiction. It just is not a great friend of mine. My dad died early due to addiction. I've like, you name it. I've had family members spend long stints in prison. I've just had a lot of bad experiences. So for me, marijuana, regardless of what the law says, is going to always be a problem for me. And so I realize that at this point, it's kind of like alcohol, where once the criminality of it is removed, you have to use a different criteria for your judgment. And that kind of poses the problem that we want to get to today, because church planner, you are going to have to deal with this. And what's amazing to me is how we talk about that. We don't talk about this in church. Like, this has happened. And I would be surprised if in the next 5 years, most of the churches in California or the other states that have passed it even mention it once during a sermon, because that's typically the disconnect that happens between real life and what happens on a Sunday morning.
What do you mean they are or they aren't going to mention it?
Are not going to mention it, are not going to deal with it, are not going to talk about it, and are not going to discuss it.
So let me ask you this. And the reason why we're bringing this up, church planner, is because of that. Obviously, there's things that you're going to have to deal with. But we also know that Peyton and I probably have differing views on this issue, because we've talked about it briefly in the past. And so one of the questions I've got for you, Peyton, is do you have a problem with any usage of marijuana, like using obviously the medical marijuana as the argument?
No. And I'm glad you brought that up, because as a nurse, it can be used as a medication. When it comes to legitimate pain medicine, particularly for cancer patients, it has been shown for people with terminal cancer to really, really help. And so, no, I do not have an issue. However, like with prescription meds, what I think has kind of been swept under the carpet is the abuse that's happened with the loopholes that are there. So, for example, we know all of the class A drugs, like the narcotics and cocaine and heroin and all that kind of stuff. Those kinds of drugs are we've got our illegal drugs, right? But then we've got drugs that are okay, like morphine, or, that you would say are associated with pain. But of course that gets abused. But then lower down on the counter is still not over the counter, but lower down is the use of drugs, like prescription meds. And those we're talking like your albuterols and, some of your other medications that get highly abused, and they're over the counter prescription. Of course, we have rock stars and pop stars, Michael Jackson. Every time a prominent, star dies, there's usually prescription drugs involved. And, so you start looking at that. Medical marijuana has also been ripe with abuse. So people who do not legitimately need it, still will find a loophole to use it legally.
Right. No, I would completely agree with you on that. In fact, because I come from the whole thing from the stance, and we've talked about this between ourselves. I don't personally have a problem with the legalization of marijuana. Having said that, I think it's important for everyone to know, my background is not like Peyton's. I haven't had as many friends as he's had suffer from addiction. I've had plenty of friends who've done pot. I myself have never been high. I've never done marijuana in my life. So I do come at it from a standpoint of realizing I don't have, all of the knowledge on its effects, what it's like. But, I can honestly say I've had so many friends that have been potheads that there's clearly a difference to me between marijuana usage and addictive drugs. And I'm not talking about psychologically addictive, which is really what marijuana is more than anything else. It's not nearly as physically addictive. Though there are starting to be studies, showing basically the remapping of neurons is creating an addiction of sorts with marijuana. But I agree completely with you in what you just said. I mean, one of the problems with medical marijuana that I have with it is real medicine. They know exactly the makeup of the medicine, right? And then it's figuring out what is the right amount to give this person who has their own body chemistry. With medical marijuana, it's, did they get the good stuff? Did they not get the good stuff? Is it the really strong stuff? Is it the really mild stuff? And so it has been completely an excuse, not completely, but the majority of it, I would say, has just been an excuse so people can get high, and not for the actual medical side of things. So I would completely agree with you. But, and I've said this before, I mean, if I was ever injured and they were like, hey, look, we got to put you on, some really addictive, like codeine or not codeine. What's the big one you always hear about? The, oh gosh, man, what's the big main pill painkiller that people are on all the time that get addicted to it? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Vicodin?
Not Vicodin.
Oxycontin?
Yes, there you go. Oxycontin. I mean, I've known a lot of people who have gotten addicted to that. I'm like, dude, if I had to be on pain medicine, I would literally be the first guy sitting there going, look, you're not putting me on that crap.
Yeah.
I mean, if I need pain medicine, then I'm going to try marijuana first because I do not want to be addicted. I don't want to be addicted to a substance. It's just one of those, personal things, the way my mind works. I don't want that.
Well, that's it. That's where, for me now. And by the way, guys, I apologize. Earlier I mentioned albuterol. if you're asthmatic out there and you're like, oh, am I abusing albuterol?
I was thinking albuterol. I was like, man, I've taken albuterol.
Yeah, no, sorry, guys. I just administered to my child today. She has chronic lung disease, and it was just, for some reason, it came out of my mouth, and I didn't realize till Pete started talking. I was thinking Adderall, which is often, I mean, there are so many drugs that people abuse. That's an amphetamine. It's used for epilepsy and ADHD, but But again, it's just something, and I don't want to give you guys ideas out there. Shoot, man, you're church planners. You're like, oh yeah, it sounds good. And here's the problem. Church planning is hard. Life is hard. And once you start reaching for something to kind of take the edge off, like for example, let's say like I used to drink and I don't drink anymore because I'm on contract with NAM, but here's the deal. I enjoy beer and I didn't have a problem with beer, but to be honest, my wife was like, hey, I'm kind of glad that you did that. And for me, because there's such a huge history of alcoholism in my family, I was the only male, and I mean literally the only male in my family not to get struck down by alcohol. I started drinking, really when I was a missionary overseas, but everything is a gateway drug. And once you start doing drugs, even coffee, I mean, there's kind of a, you go to coffee to wake you up, and mentally that, and I'm not saying coffee's bad. I drink lots of coffee.
Yes, you do.
There are times though where I get off of it because every few years I'll go, this is not healthy. I'm now approaching that point again where I'm like, okay, I am too dependent on this now, to the point where various times of the day I'll get headaches, and I'll feel I need more coffee. And what happens is once, for example, with the criminality of marijuana, what happens is you start taking marijuana and there's this idea that this is an unconventional way to take the edge off or to deal with emotional pain or whatever. And what happens is, for example, in an addict, if a guy started using when he was, 15, 16, what you'll find with an addict is years later when he gets cleaned, he'll have like an arrested development. When he gets off that substance, his coping skills will be the coping skill of a 15 or 16-year-old, because what he has used to cope rather than emotional maturity that should have developed and helps us cope with things as we develop psychologically, what's happened is that all went on hold and the drug replaced that. So often when you find addicts who are coming clean, they're still like teenagers when they clean up. They haven't learned to cope with things, and they have to go all the way back and do the hard work of overcoming all that hardship much later in life. And of course, by then it's much harder because their pressures are much bigger. And so, but anyways, pot, once you start going towards the criminality of it, you have used this gateway drug, which then when you've crossed that line, makes it easier for you to grab something a little bit heavier. And that's what's known as a gateway drug. They statistics and studies on marijuana will tell you that most people that ended up in a harder drug start off with marijuana. And normally before that, they started with alcohol. And
yeah, but the statistics
not a slippery
don't
slope argument.
The statistics, however, don't bear out that if you did marijuana,
yes,
you're more likely to do the others.
Well, you don't usually skip. You are more likely, but it's not. Here's what the statistics don't show. They don't show that if you do marijuana, you're going to. And that's what I mean by it's not a slippery slope, logical fallacy. That if you do this,
Right.
you'll end up down there.
Yeah.
But what happens is once you, and I've watched this happen with people around me, as recent as this last year and a half, someone who I watch and observe on a regular basis, who is not a Christian. I'm watching them just go from being one person to completely a different, and it's all pot. The whole thing is pot. Horrible stuff has happened. This person's just basically toked their life away, and they don't see it. They don't see that it's just destroying them. And I've talked to this person because this person's very open to the Lord and very much is interested in spiritual things and having conversations. And about a year and a half ago, the person was saying, hey, what about pot? God made it, come on, it has to be. And I said, well, the thing is though, is yes, God made lots of stuff, But the question is, what's it going to do to you? That's always a question you ought to ask. What is it going to do to my quality of life? And so that's where Paul comes back in Corinthians. He says, look, all things are permissible to me, but not all things are beneficial. Doot, doot. Hey, that's for a euphoric reviewer. This one's going out to you, my friend. But Paul says all things are permissible, but not all things are beneficial. And I think once the government says, well, this is now legal, like I said, the criteria for judging that changes. And rather than it being permissible, the question we need to ask, and I think what we always need to ask, is it beneficial? Because let me remind you that the law should not be your criteria for what is righteous. Keep in mind that exterminating Jews about 60 years ago, 70 years ago in Berlin was legal. Slavery 100 years ago was legal. Discriminating bathrooms 50 years ago was legal. We could go on and on and on. There are things we do today as a country, like abortions, like not the kinds for medical emergencies or all that. I don't want to get all political about it, but there are things we do right now that are legal. But the question is, what does the gospel say about this? What does God say? So we always have to kind of, legalize late-term abortions? Hey, right on. And you can apply this logic to everything, that whatever's legal, but it does, removing the criminality of this does leave us with a dilemma, because people will point back to alcohol and coffee and say, how's this any different?
Yeah. And I get that. In fact, growing up and in college, where I knew most of my pot smoking friends, even though, yes, we did go to Biola University. Most of my friends are smoking pot. One of my really
Christian University.
What? One of my really good friends, and I go, he was always like, "Hey, do you want to try it?" And I'm like, "No." And I go, honestly, I don't have a problem with it. I go, but my big deal is the legal issue. I go, it's not legal. And so I used to always say, I go, if it were legal, I'd totally try it. If I were in Amsterdam, I'd totally try it. Right. And so I literally texted him this last week. I'm like, so weed's legal now. And he goes, I thought of you. He goes, you want to try? And I go, dude, I'm 41 years old. I'm going to do pot now.
Yeah.
Like there's no reason I can't even point to being a stupid kid. It's like, why would I do it at this point? So, I want our listeners to know I'm not running out there to go, oh, sweet. I'm going to go try pot now, because that's not it.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's beneficial. There were a lot of reasons that I was actually for the legalization of it. One, I think I've had a real big problem with a lot of the criminality of it, and how your life is basically over if you get arrested for it and thrown in jail. And, so many people have this, dark mark on their record. They're not going to be able to get work. It's impossible for them to get work. It's really difficult for them to do anything once they leave jail.
Well, that's it. There's a huge argument to be made that the criminalization of drug addiction or drug use makes it harder to treat addiction. There are those on the other side who say no, because that facilitates reaching what's called rock bottom.
Right.
So Russell Brand would be, which is usually when an addict cries out for help, when they're literally at rock bottom, they can't go down any further. And that becomes the surrender moment where they say, I need help. I have a problem. So there's good arguments on both sides, because what Russell Brand says as an ex-addict is, look, if I didn't have to hide this, but it were, if the criminality were removed, I would have been able to have gotten treatment much, much sooner. And so there are those that feel, no, that's just enabling, and you never want to enable addiction. But there's good arguments to be made, which, by the way, when the church learns to separate moral arguments from arguments like in this case of practicality. That's not a moral argument. You're not making a judgment on the morality of it when you say legalize it. It's kind of like gay marriage. This was the thing that was driving me nuts, was during the gay marriage debate. It is a civil rights issue that the government, that was the conversation the government wanted to have. I think I said this on the last podcast. That was a civil rights issue. They weren't having the moral, they weren't saying, look, let's have a conversation about whether this is morally right or wrong. What the government was asking is it fair to deny them? And I'll be honest, like the arguments made from the scripture, like when Paul says you're expecting, he says, we do not expect those outside to act like believers. And Paul says we don't impose that burden on them. Like we're not expecting Rome to act like Jerusalem. We're not expecting Egypt to act like Israel. That's just foolish. And that's what the church is doing, is it turned it into a moral argument when the government was voting on a civil rights issue. And of course, the church getting that wrong goes and, stands on the side of bigotry and gets known as being bigots. And we do it to ourselves repeatedly. And so when Russell Brand is talking about this, he's talking as an addict. And I'm not convinced. I'm hearing both arguments, and the jury's out for me because I don't know which one would help more. But if there were one that helped people get off addiction quicker, that's the side I'd go for.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm totally with you on that. And I think, and part of the problem for me, because, I didn't have a problem with the legalization of marijuana. Still don't have a problem with it. Don't plan on trying it. Hope I never have to be, in a situation where I need it medically. To me, where my argument bothers me, my own argument bothers me, right? Because I don't have a problem with it. In fact, I was talking with Travis, who's a church planner in Florida.
Total pot smoker.
Yeah, no, not
Just
at all.
joking.
Boy, dude, don't even say that.
Joking.
He would be like
Just
horrified if it, like the rumors started, right? He gets fired from his church plant.
He works for us. We know things. No, we don't. I'm teasing.
I was
shut up.
I was just like, I go, I got to be honest with you, I don't have a problem with it. I go, and if you look at it, I mean, like you look at some of the health benefits that this thing can have. So many people with so many conditions, not just cancer, epilepsy, they benefit tremendously by being able to have marijuana. And yes, there's abuse and everything, but part of me is kind of looking at it and I go, and I understand the argument where people are coming from and they go, well, God made it. Okay. Cause it's not like you do anything to the marijuana plant. Like,
Right.
it's literally ready to go right there. You got it. Maybe you dry the leaves out and that's about it from what I understand. Right. It's not like I'm an expert on that, but
Stop giving them ideas.
Well, and guys, there is money to be made there. No, but anyway, the problem
By vocational church planning, this is not an option.
if you're Bivo in Colorado, here you go. But the problem then that I have with my own argument is I go, okay, well, great. What about opium? And what about, cocaine? And I look at those and I don't see the same thing with those. The addictive qualities are so great physically there. That does start to scare me. I'm like, okay, well, that's not stuff, but yet I could make the same argument. It's a plant, it's natural. You could take an opium plant, naturally and get some of the same benefits. And I'm like, man, I'm not comfortable with that, with those. And I think for me, a big part of that reasoning has been the physical addiction that you can get from the others so quickly that you don't get as quickly, though it can come, right? There, like I said, there's studies showing some of the neurons being rewired in your brain or do cause some sort of a physical addiction, but it does take more time. And that's kind of been, the line that I've been on, but I realize
Well,
there's a danger with that.
And pot has a huge psychological addictive
It does.
factor to it.
It
I mean,
does.
massive. And that's the strength of it. Let's just think for a second about the millennials, right? The millennial generation is probably the most addicted to pot generation we've had since the 60s. And there are reasons for that. I mean, people give the millennials a really hard time. And, my wife and I have been talking about this quite a bit because, we're at the age where our nephews and nieces are millennials, and, we're fascinated by them. We talk to them, we watch them, and we're not millennials. We were the Gen Xers, and we thought we were pretty cool. I still think I'm cool, but here's the deal: is you watch the millennials. Think back now to the age they're at when they were young, and I mean pretty young. 9/11 happened, and studies that they're doing now in this generation have shown that a lot of the anxiety that they have is from watching the world turn upside down like that in a moment. Like all their security at that moment, it terrified the crowd. Think how freaky it was as an adult when that happened, and how just kind of paradigm shifting it was to watch it happen. And the terror when you saw the second plane smash into the building, and you had this little like, is this a dream or is this real? Like, this can't really be happening. That whole thing, but being young and watching that thing happen. Like, I remember when the Challenger blew up, the space shuttle, and I was in junior high, and that affected me for the rest of my life. All my generation, like, that was a big deal to us. You could literally ask my generation, where were you when you heard that the Challenger blew up? And people were crying. It was a big event. Like, it was kind of traumatic. So then you got that generation 5 years later, all their friends, parents are losing their homes, losing their jobs. So 5 years later, so it's not for no reason that the millennial generation doesn't want to have careers like the generation before them did, doesn't want to be homeowners, kind of live, travel light and live loose. It's not surprising because their security was just completely trashed, like all during the developmental years of their lives. And then enter pot, right? Like, pot all of a sudden became this way. They go to school and they would literally, remember when we'd hear about they're having panic attacks at school because of tests? That was just one additional stressor. Of course, all the conservatives and Fox News and all these people come in and go, it's because everybody gets a blue ribbon, and it's because we tell them everybody's a winner, and then they come up against real life. And then the Quaker oatmeal man shows out, he comes out in a pair of Speedos and he dances around, and then boom, that's the end of the conservative lunch hour, and we've all made our judgments. No, the fact is they were already dealing with so much stinking anxiety. And pot was just kind of almost unfair to this generation because they've got this heightened sense of anxiety where the smallest things are freaking them out because their whole world's been rocked. And now you've got marijuana in there. This generation has not learned to cope. Like I said, their coping skills have gone on hold. And now they're just basically, they can't cope with 9 to 5 jobs at Starbucks. You know what I'm saying? It's just too much because there is this anxiety that's latent in many of them that's been created by
but let's be fair. Some of them just need to suck it up, Buttercup.
Well, there is that for sure. And I'm not making a blanket statement like every millennial walking around is a nervous wreck. I have millennials within my family who are homeless and on the streets. I have millennials in my family who are doing pot, playing poker, and working as bartenders. And that's, chucked in a college, fully paid college education for that. I have family members who have been put in jail. I have family members that have, on and on to being brilliant and employed by some of the highest tech companies in the world, because they're just geniuses. And so, within my own family, I see the broad spectrum, if that makes sense. And so I'm not making a a blanket statement, but what I am saying is, to me, the way that I look at pot is it can be, especially when you introduce it to young people, it's just not fair, because life is hard. And then with this generation, it was much harder for them. I would say they had a much harder go than even my generation. So,
yeah, I get that part of it. And so I would say back to the original question, which is, how do you deal with this in the church plant? That's, I think, one that I would probably defer more to your judgment on that, because I have such little experience with it, right? Having never been high, like one of the things that you guys, if you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you hear us talk about beer all the time. I love beer. I think beer is the nectar of the gods, if ever there was.
I love beer, even though I don't drink it. And I love it from afar. But
I rarely get to drink. Like I've had more to drink in the last probably 6 weeks than at any other time. And that's because I've been traveling, and my wife doesn't drink. So that pretty much means I don't drink. I don't have any in the fridge right now. And usually when I buy like a 6-pack, it'll last literally months in my fridge because I don't have time. And for me, and I've said this before, I have been drunk. Okay. I got drunk a lot in college. But
that's where you learn to do dancing, man.
That's right. I learned to do the Running Man, but I could always control. Like
what am I saying?
I knew I could stop because I wasn't an addict. Having never been high, I don't know how that whole thing works. But to me, the thing that I wouldn't like about it is just, once you're high, it's kind of like, okay, well, you got to ride that thing out. I mean, I don't know how you like drinking. You just quit drinking. Yeah. And you're going to come down off of it. I don't know how it works with marijuana, because I don't have any experience with that. But so I'm looking at these church planners going, okay, how do you deal with that? And I guess my question to you, Peyton, is that pretty much the only argument you make is just because all things are permissible doesn't mean they're beneficial. I mean, is that the argument that you just rely on?
Yeah, I think even with wine, where Paul says, don't get drunk on the Spirit, but be filled with, I mean, what is wrong with me? Don't get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery, but be filled with the Holy Spirit. I think when it comes down to it, you at a certain point, you have to kind of weigh, this is what your life could be, where you're going to wreck it, or this is what your life should be. This is God's plan for you to be filled with His Holy Spirit. Like, for example, I mentioned earlier taking the edge off. So I come home, I've had a hard day. Like, I've had a hard day. Man, I sure could use a beer. When you start talking like that, you're in trouble, because what you've done is you've gone to, Bacchus, god of
that's only because you don't have a 2-year-old anymore. I'm just saying, I'm throwing that out there.
But you're literally reaching towards another god. When it's connected to that, it's connected. You've put that beer in a place of being your high tower, your refuge, your stronghold. I really could use, you've had an emotionally exhausting day, and you're saying a beer, will take the edge off. And really, I mean, it does. It's like the tale of two cities. It could be the best of times or the worst of times. You could either go to that beer and get a little buzz and sink back in your overchair and put on some Oprah, or you could do what Paul says and say, cast all your anxieties upon Him. Worry about nothing. Like, go and use that time. Like, sit in that same overchair, put the TV channel aside, keep the beer in the fridge, and go to the Lord and say, God, this is, my day sucked, and boom, boom, boom. And I think more than anything, we have to model that to our people. We have to be people who live like that. And then people will see that, because people will listen to what you say, but they'll actually become what you are. They'll listen to what you say, but that won't lead to life change. What leads to life change in people is when they see a transformed life by the Holy Spirit, and they say, yeah, I want to be like that. And here's the deal. like I said, the whole argument about permissible and this and that, Paul makes the next statement in that passage where he says, but I will not be mastered by anything. Food for the stomach and stomach for the food, but I will not be mastered by anything. And so Paul is saying, look, these things just aren't worth, giving up control, giving up, your body. I mean, this is in Corinthians where he's talked about your body being a temple of the Holy Spirit. And I don't mean that in the sense of like people misquote that all the time by going, your body's a temple. It will stop eating donuts in, right? But what Paul actually meant was he was saying, don't join your body with a prostitute. He was making a moral argument, not a health argument. So it wasn't the anti-smoking scripture. But here's the deal. This is a moral issue, is when I say, I'm going to turn to a substance and put that substance in the place of God. I am literally committing idolatry at that moment. And so that's a deeper issue for me. But also on top of that, what I would do is I would come to that person and say, look, there's two ways you can live here. And I think, like you said, permissible or beneficial. There's two ways. You could do all the permissible things, and whatever the government says is legal, you can go do that. And you will never find an addict. And by the way, when someone's arguing with a pastor about pot, they're an addict. Like, they just are an addict. I had a pastor once at a conference tell me, coffee control. This is the first time I gave it up. He goes, coffee, dominates you, it controls you. You're an addict to it. And although it kind of really pissed me off at the moment when he said that, I was like, I went away and I'm like, he's kind of right. And that was where I started going on coffee fast for like 6 months to a year. And then I would start up again. And it's just that idea that I don't want things to master me. When Romans comes in and Paul says, yield the instruments of your body as weapons of righteousness, I want to be a weapon, right? I want to be a lethal weapon to the kingdom of darkness, not Steven Seagal. I want to be a weapon. I want to be a sharp weapon. I want to be a dangerous weapon. I don't want to be a dull, rusty blade that nobody uses anymore and goes, hey, that's a cool little relic. That was once pretty useful and did a lot of damage. But, and I guess when it comes down to it, that's the context that Paul's talking about when he's saying you're a temple of the Holy Spirit. You are the place God has chosen to glorify himself out of. And because of that, there is a certain higher calling that we have. And so because of the effects that pot, I mean, I could go through all that. You guys can research it yourself, but that's how I would deal with someone. I wouldn't guilt him into it, but I would tell him, I'd say, look, I want you to be free. So we had a guy in our church plant who, he was in a wheelchair and he has a spinal condition, and he was, doing the medical marijuana thing, and he was just completely addicted. And I had a really big, gang member dude. I don't know if you remember, Anthony.
Of course.
Anthony came up to me during the leaders meeting once, and he's like, bro, you better hold me back right now, because I'm going to take that guy in the wheelchair. I'm going to put his head through a wall. And I go, what's up? And he goes, a girl in our discussion group just said that she was trying for the first time in her life. She was a young girl, high school, college age, trying to get clean. And she had gone for 3 days without doing pot. And he goes, and there he started saying, hey, I got a stash right now. See me after. You don't have to give that up. I got a medical prescription. He's like, I'm about to kill him. What I can tell you is that dude, he had a big marijuana, turquoise marijuana leaf around his neck. All I can say to you is, we went and talked to him, said, hey, look, people are trying to get clean here. That's a gateway drug for a lot of people. And if someone expresses to you they're trying to get clean, man, we need you to respect that and not, and he was cool. He backed off. But the reality is that dude has absolutely transformed. I remember coming back months later, after not being there, after handing the church off, coming back, and he was one of the people in the back. And I came up to him, looked different. Just was radiating God's presence. I don't even know how to describe it. I went up to him and I said, "What's happened to you, man?" And he goes, "Jesus, man, just Jesus in my life." And I don't know how to describe it other than he was a different dude. You could say he was saved. You could say he was filled with the Holy Spirit. You could say he was, clean. I mean, you could say whatever you want. All I can say is it was like what people used to say of Robert Murray M'Cheyne, that they'd say he'd come straight out of the presence of God into the pulpit and he almost glowed. Like he just was so filled with the presence of God. That dude was full of the Holy Spirit. And I don't know how to describe that or put that into words. You kind of have to go experience that transformation where someone came to your church and they were one way, and you've been away and you come back and you look at them and they're just a different human being. And you just sense God coming off of them. I don't know how else to put that, but those are those two ways. And I've watched it happen time and time again in churches that I've been a part of. And I'm convinced,
I dig it, man. I do.
Well, that's about all we have time for.
So yeah, we're starting up a new church plant, the First Baptist of Marijuana.
What's the logo, Pete?
Oh man, I tell you, it'll be really interesting to see how things play out with like the cartels and stuff. Like I believe that the prohibition against a lot of these drugs like marijuana are a big part of the reason why we've got these huge crime syndicates. Yeah. Will that mean they pour over more into the states? Because do you think they're not giving up their money, right? Like no. I can see them literally. You open up a head shop in California, man. They're going to come in there and be like, "Look, you're now our head shop." I mean, is it going to get worse in the states with the cartels, or will it eventually break them? I don't know.
There's a huge surge in crime around areas where shops have opened up, and it's always going to be, because with all of the people grabbing the legal drugs, the crowd that is connected to the illegal drugs are going to be there. Yeah. And and just put it this way, when you got one type of deal, one type of substance being given legally or not, it's going to be a place where people will focus sales of illegal and illicit substance. I'm not saying in that shop, but it's just how it is. And there's going to be all the other vice and things around it because vice attracts vice. So, anyways, hey, I know we're out of time, but I'm sure the IRS is going to want their cut. And speaking of the IRS, Pete.
Well, if I would like to somehow simplify all of the accounting and bookkeeping I got to do at my church, do you know of an easy way to do that, Peyton?
I do, Pete, and I can tell you they're not doing pot. They are on their game. They are sharp, and they are ready to handle all of your IRS tax bookkeeping needs. Look, you can't be doing all your books, and if you do, you really need to find someone that you trust. Simplify Church is a third party, yes, but it's run by church planners for church planners, and you can go ahead and get signed up with them and talk to them. Just set up an appointment. Go to simplifychurch.com and talk to them about your bookkeeping needs. And they've got various programs that they'll talk about with you, and they'll get you started and help you be compliant with the IRS, help you do good accounting. They'll do it for you. You tell them your deposits. They do end of year tax receipts, which church planners is coming up. They need to send those out to your people right away. So get started with simplifychurch.com.
I thought they needed that right on the end. I just, thought I'd cap it off with that.
Yeah. Makes Chewbacca happy. That works for me. This has been Peyton Jones and Pete Mitchell on the Church Planner Podcast, reminding you to stay in school and don't do drugs. And if you want to reach the ones that nobody's reaching, you need to go where nobody's going and do what nobody's doing.
Thanks for joining us for another weekly episode of the Church Planner Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Peyton Jones. We'd love to hear your comments on this episode of the Church Planner Podcast. Visit us online and let us know what you thought at churchplannerpodcast.com. If you subscribe to us via iTunes and have enjoyed the podcast, leave us a positive review. The more positive reviews we receive in iTunes, the more iTunes will promote us to other church planners who would benefit from this show. This podcast is brought to you by the Church Planner Magazine, which is available in the iTunes newsstand or online via churchplannermagazine.com.